I want to start in the middle, not at the beginning, not with the polished origin story, not with the careful explanation of what this show is and why I made it and who it's for. I'll get to all of that, but I want to start in the middle because the middle is where I actually am. The middle is where most of us are. And starting there feels more honest than pretending I have it figured out from the top. So, the middle. I'm a Caribbean woman of color. I grew up in a diaspora between two worlds, belonging fully to neither, finding my own version of home somewhere in a space between them. I'm a queer. I'm a healer who is still being healed. I am someone who spent a long time being very good at performing okay, at being capable and present and pulled together, while quietly, in the spaces nobody looked, coming completely undone. And I got tired of it. Not tired in a dramatic way, tired in a slow, accumulating way. The way you get tired of carrying something heavy when nobody knows you're carrying it. So I made a podcast. Welcome to Unapologetically Us. I'm Neeka. And this, before we get into the season, before the episode, before all of it, this is me sitting down with you and telling you the truth about why I'm here. I grew up in a diaspora, which means I grew up Caribbean without growing up in the Caribbean, which means I grew up in a particular kind of in between that I didn't have language for until much later. Belonging to a culture deeply, completely, in ways that lived in my body and my cooking and the way I moved through rooms. And also not quite belonging to it in the way that people who grew up on the islands did. I knew the food. I knew the music. I knew the particular authority of Caribbean elders and the particular silence around certain topics and the particular way love was expressed through doing rather than saying. I absorbed all of it in my family's home, in the communities around us, in the churches, in the kitchens, and the gatherings where Caribbean people built something of a home in a country that was not the one they came from. I also grew up as someone whose full self, the queer self, the questioning self, the self that wanted to love differently and live differently and believe differently, did not fit cleanly into the version of a Caribbean womanhood that was available to me. So I learned to code switch to be one version of myself in one room and another version in another. To hold the full complexity of who I was in private and offer a more manageable version in public. I got very good at it. So good that for a long time I stopped noticing I was doing it. That is a particular kind of exhaustion. The exhaustion of never fully landing, of always being partially elsewhere, of loving the culture you came from, and also knowing there are parts of you it has not yet made space for. This show is partially about that, about being Caribbean and becoming yourself at the same time, about holding the roots and letting the branches go where they need to go, about refusing to choose between your heritage and your wholeness, and finding a way to be both fully at the same time. There wasn't one moment. I want to be honest about that because the clean origin story, the single turning point, the one day everything changed, that's not what happened. What happened was more like a slow accumulation of smaller moments, each one adding weight to something I was carrying without a name for it. There was the conversation, the one I needed to have, about something real, something that had been sitting on my chest for months. that I went looking for with someone I trusted. And somewhere in the middle of it, the conversation shifted into something safer, something more manageable, something that didn't require either of us to go where it actually was going. And I sat with that afterwards, that particular disappointment of a conversation that almost got somewhere real and didn't. There was the room. I've sat in many rooms, professional rooms, community rooms, spiritual rooms, where I was the only one who was all of what I am simultaneously. And I learned to be strategic about which parts of myself I brought into which room. The Caribbean parts here, the queer parts there, the healing parts somewhere else entirely. Never the whole thing at once. Never all of me in the same space at the same time. There was a breaking point, more than one, if I'm being accurate. The places where something that had been held together for too long finally gave way, where the body stopped asking and started demanding, where the performing okay ran out, where I had to put things down, not because I was ready, but because I had no choice. And then there was the search. I looked for the podcast that held all of it. The Caribbean specificity, the queerness, the money silence, the grief of outgrowing people, the spirituality that didn't require me to be smaller, the honest conversation about what healing actually looks and feels like in the body. Not the Instagram version, not the 5 steps version, the real version. The version where you do all the work and still sometimes find yourself back in the old patterns wondering what happened. I looked for that show. It didn't exist. So I stopped waiting for someone else to make it. That is why this show exists. Not because I have arrived, not because I have the answers, but because I got tired of waiting for someone braver than me to go first. I am going first, and I am inviting you to come with me. I want to speak directly to you now, not to a general audience, to you, specifically the woman who is listening to this. This show is for you if you are Caribbean, or if your roots are Caribbean, or if you grew up in a diaspora carrying a culture that shaped you completely even when you weren't fully inside it. This show is for you if you are a woman of color navigating healing and identity and love and money. A world that was not built with you in mind and does not always have space for your full, complicated, still becoming self. This show is for you if you are queer, if you have been loving without a map, without community permission, without a single example of what your love could look like from the people and places that formed you. If you have ever had to choose between belonging and being yourself, if you are still figuring out how to be both, this show is for you if you have been the strong one, if your name gets called in every crisis, if nobody thinks to ask if you are okay, because you're always okay, because capable people don't get asked, because you learned early that your value was tied to your usefulness, and you have been performing usefulness ever since. This show is for you if you are in the in-between, if you have outgrown something, a relationship, a community, a version of yourself, and you're standing in the space between what you were and what you're becoming, grieving what is being left behind and not yet home in what is coming next. This show is for you if you carry money anxiety in your body, even when the numbers are okay. If you check your account with one eye closed. if ease feels dangerous even when you finally have it. And this show is for you if you are just tired. Tired of performing okay. Tired of having the watered down version of the conversation. Tired of making yourself smaller so the room stays comfortable. Tired of being unapologetically yourself only in private. You do not have to whisper anymore. Not here. Not in this show. Not with me. I want to tell you about the moment I stopped shrinking. Or more accurately, the moment I decided to stop. Because the stopping is not a single event. It's a decision you make over and over, sometimes daily. Sometimes in the middle of a sentence, when you catch yourself qualifying something true into something more palatable. For me, it came quietly, not dramatically, not a sudden revelation, but a slow, gathering refusal. The refusal to keep editing, to keep code switching, to keep arriving in rooms as a careful, managed version of myself, and leaving with the full version still unexpressed. Still waiting, still patient, in a way that was starting to feel less like grace and more like erasure. I started saying things out loud that I had only ever thought. Small things at first, then the bigger ones. I stopped apologizing before finishing sentences. I stopped making my opinions smaller so someone else could feel larger. I started taking up the space that was already mine. Not aggressively, not as a statement, just as a fact. As the simplest possible fact. I am here. I am this. This is what I think. This is what I need. This is who I love. This is what I will not be any longer. It did not make everyone comfortable. Some people needed me small to feel okay. And when I stopped being small, they got uncomfortable. And that discomfort showed up in ways that were painful and clarifying in equal measure. I lost some things. I found other things. I'm still in the middle of finding them. But I made this podcast from that place of someone who decided imperfectly, incompletely, still in progress, that the full version of herself was worth showing up as. That is the whole show. That is every episode. That is what I want for you too. Here's what I want you to know before you listen to a single episode of this show. I'm not a finished thing. I'm not hosting this show from a place of having arrived. I'm not the woman who has resolved all of her patterns and healed all her wounds and figured out exactly who she is and how she wants to love and what she believes and how much she is worth. I am none of those things fully. I still overthink. I still sometimes say yes when I mean no and spend days recovering from it. I still have money anxiety on risings when the account is fine. I still feel the pull towards familiar, even when familiar was never safe. I'm still learning to receive love without immediately measuring whether I deserve it. I'm still slowly learning to exist in a room without managing the room. I'm telling you this because I think the most dangerous thing a show like this could do is present a version of healing that is complete, that has a before and after, that implies there is a destination you reach and then you're done. There isn't. Healing is not arrival. It is the growing capacity to notice what is happening, to understand where it comes from, to make a different choice, sometimes to make the same old choice, with more awareness this time, to be gentler with yourself, in the repetition, to trust that the work is happening even when it doesn't look like progress. That is what I'm doing. That is what we are doing together in this show. You don't have to have it figured out to be here. You just have to be willing to be honest about where you are. Before I send you into the season, I want to say something directly to the woman who found this show at exactly the right moment. You know who you are. You're the one who has been carrying things quietly that you have never had the right space to put down. Who has been performing okay for so long that sometimes you forget okay as a performance. Who loves her culture and her people, and also knows that there are parts of herself those people have not yet made space for. Who has done the work, the therapy, the journaling, the healing, the hard conversations, and is still sometimes bewildered by how much work there is still to do. You're the one who needed someone to go first, to say the thing, to name the experience, to sit in the complicated and not rush towards the resolution. I am going first. Every Wednesday, all of it. The shrinking, the strength, the survival mode, the boundaries, the grief, the money, the love that didn't have a map, and the unlearning that is still in progress. All of it, out loud, unapologetically for you. You are not too much. You never were. The world just wasn't big enough yet for all of what you are. Welcome to Unapologetically Us. I'm Neeka, and I'm so glad you're here. Episode 1 drops right after this. I'll see you there.